The crosshair settled on Chief Derek Wolf's temple. Through the magnified optic of the Mk-22 advanced sniper rifle, Alexis Hartwell could see individual beads of sweat rolling down the side of his face, despite the negative 18 degrees Celsius. She could see the tension in his jaw as he prepared to kick the door. She could see the exact spot where the 338 Lapua Magnum round would enter his skull if her hand twitched even a fraction of an inch to the left. Her finger rested on the trigger. 2 pounds of pressure, then 3. The rifle wanted to fire. Her training wanted her to fire. Center mass, controlled pairs, eliminate the threat. Except Chief Derek Wolf wasn't the threat. He was walking into one. Alexis forced her breathing to slow, forced the crosshair to drift 6 inches to the right, forced herself to aim at the stone door frame instead of the man she was supposed to be protecting. The man who had spent the last 6 months trying to drive her out of the teams. The man who had told her to her face that she was a political stunt, a diversity hire, a liability that would get real operators killed. Now she was about to save his life by nearly taking it. The wind screamed across the Hindu Kush ridge at 20 knots, trying to shove the bullet off course before it even left the barrel. 11,400 feet above sea level. The air was so thin that every breath felt like drowning. The cold had stopped being painful an hour ago. Now it was just a numbing void that made her fingers feel like wooden blocks wrapped around the rifle's pistol grip. Through the scope, Chief Wolf's boot started to rise. The kick was coming. In 3 seconds, he would breach that door. In 4 seconds, the pressure plate explosive wired to the frame would detonate. In 5 seconds, the belt-fed machine gun positioned in the hallway beyond would open fire into the fatal funnel where Wolf and his entire stack would be packed like sardines. Alexis didn't have 5 seconds. She had now. She pulled the trigger. But that trigger pull was the end of something. To understand why Petty Officer First Class Alexis Hartwell was lying on a frozen mountain in Afghanistan, about to commit what would technically be friendly fire, you had to go back 48 hours. Back to when this was still supposed to be a simple mission. The briefing room at Bagram Airfield smelled like burnt coffee and the particular anxiety that comes from men preparing to walk into harm's way. Alexis sat in the back row, her operational folder open but unread. She had learned during her first month with SEAL Team 7 that sitting in the back meant fewer eyes on her, fewer opportunities for the casual comments that felt like paper cuts, death by 1,000 dismissals. Admiral Richard Hawthorne stood at the front of the room, his silver hair immaculate, even in a combat zone. Behind him, satellite imagery of a valley system in the Tora Bora region glowed on the projector screen. Alexis recognized the terrain. Limestone ridges, cave complexes, the kind of place where you could hide an army, or lose one. "Gentlemen," Hawthorne began, then caught himself with the practiced ease of someone who had been through media training. "And Petty Officer Hartwell, what I'm about to tell you is classified, top-secret code word. Operation Crimson Eagle is a joint task force action to recover stolen Russian tactical nuclear devices, specifically RA-115 suitcase nukes, small enough to fit in a backpack, large enough to level 6 city blocks." The room went silent. Nuclear weapons had a way of doing that. Hawthorne clicked to the next slide, a grainy photograph of a bearded man in traditional Afghan dress. But the eyes were wrong. Too light, too Western. Intelligence indicates these devices are being brokered by an unknown Western operator. Former military, Tier 1 background. He's been ghost for 10 years, operating in the shadows, selling expertise and hardware to the highest bidder. His current clients are a splinter cell with ties to al-Qaeda remnants. If these nukes leave Afghanistan, we're looking at a catastrophic scenario. Another click. Topographical maps, elevation markers, range cards. The target compound is here. Former Soviet listening post, repurposed by local warlords. Our ground element, Bravo team, will conduct a direct action raid to secure the devices. Time on target is 0300 local. Insertion via MH47 at this LZ, 8 clicks out. Overwatch will be established here. He pointed to a ridge that looked like God had taken a knife to the mountains. Overwatch team will consist of 2 personnel, a spotter and a sniper. Their job is to provide cover for Bravo's approach and neutralize any threats that emerge during the breach. Alexis felt the weight of attention shift. She didn't look up from her folder. Master Chief Brennan will serve as spotter and tactical advisor. Petty Officer Hartwell will be primary sniper. The silence in the room changed texture. It went from focused attention to something else. Something that felt like doubt made audible through the absence of sound. Chief Derek Wolf raised his hand. He didn't wait to be called on. Sir, with respect, is it wise to put an untested operator in a critical Overwatch position? Hartwell's only been with the team for 6 months. She hasn't been blooded. Admiral Hawthorne's expression didn't change, but Alexis saw his jaw tighten. Petty Officer Hartwell graduated first in her sniper class. She holds the current base record for cold bore accuracy at 1,500 meters. She is the most qualified shooter available for this operation. On a range, Wolf pressed. With all due respect to Hartwell's qualification scores, a range is not the same as combat. When rounds start coming back at you, when the pressure is on, we need someone we can count on not to freeze. Alexis kept her eyes on the satellite imagery. She had learned not to engage. Engagement meant emotion. Emotion meant proving them right. That women were too emotional for this work. A voice cut through the tension. Gravel over broken glass. Wolf, when's the last time you shot a 1,500-meter cold bore group you could cover with a quarter? Master Chief Garrett Brennan stood near the door. His arms crossed over a chest that looked like it had been carved from the same granite as the mountains they'd be operating in. 61 years old. 5 deployments to the first Gulf War. 2 to Panama. 3 more to Somalia. The lines on his face were a roadmap of every hard decision he'd ever had to make. And there were a lot of lines. Wolf hesitated. I'm just saying, I know what you're saying. You're saying you're worried about the new operator. That's reasonable. I was worried too, until I saw her shoot. Brennan's eyes found Alexis, and there was something in them that might have been respect, or might have been the baseline professionalism of a man who didn't have time for politics. She's better than you, Wolf. She's better than me. And unless you want to hump an M110 up that ridge and pull your own Overwatch, I suggest you shut up and let the professionals brief. The room went quiet again, but it was a different quiet, the kind where people reassess. Admiral Hawthorne cleared his throat. Master Chief Brennan brings up an excellent point. This operation was designed around the specific skill sets of the personnel assigned. Hartwell's long-range precision capabilities are exactly what we need for this kind of terrain. Bravo team will be exposed during their approach. Overwatch is their insurance policy. He clicked to the next slide. Rules of engagement. ROE is restrictive. This is technically sovereign Afghan territory. We are operating under the umbrella of ongoing peacekeeping operations, but we cannot be seen as the aggressors. Do not fire unless fired upon. Do not engage unless you have positive identification of hostile intent. This is a scalpel, not a hammer. We get in, we secure the packages, we get out. The world never knows we were there. Alexis finally looked up from her folder. The satellite imagery showed more than the Admiral was saying. The compound wasn't just a repurposed listening post. The defensive positions were too good. The sightlines too carefully managed. Someone with training had turned that valley into a killing ground. She raised her hand. Hawthorne nodded. Hartwell. Sir, the thermal imaging from the last pass, can we pull that up? A moment of hesitation, then the Admiral clicked back 3 slides. The compound appeared in shades of gray and white, heat signatures blooming like flowers against the cold stone. Alexis stood, moving to the front of the room. She was aware of every eye on her, aware that this was a test within a test. She pointed to a cluster of heat signatures on the western ridge. These signatures here? They're uniform, spaced exactly 40 meters apart. That's not random sentry placement. That's professional interval for interlocking fields of fire. She traced her finger along the valley floor. And this pattern here, the way the snow's been disturbed, it's too regular. That's not foot traffic. That's deliberate concealment. I'd bet money there are pressure plates under that snow, IEDs daisy-chained along the approach. Wolf leaned forward. Or it's just wind patterns, shadows. Alexis ignored him. Her eyes were on the Admiral. Sir, if I'm right, Bravo team is walking into an ambush. This isn't a depot. It's a trap. Hawthorne studied the imagery. His face was unreadable. Intelligence assessment concluded this was a low-security target, local warlords with minimal tactical training. Then intelligence is wrong, sir. The words hung in the air like a challenge. You didn't tell an admiral that intelligence was wrong. Not as a petty officer. Not in your first 6 months on a team. Not if you wanted to have a career. Brennan stepped forward, studying the thermal image more closely. She's right. Look at the heat bloom from this structure here. That's a generator signature. Too big for basic power needs. You run a generator that size, you're powering something serious. Comms equipment, maybe electronic warfare systems. Hawthorne's expression didn't change, but Alexis saw the calculation happening behind his eyes. The math of risk versus reward. The political cost of aborting an operation versus the tactical cost of walking into an ambush. Noted, he said finally. Overwatch will adjust their assessment based on what they observe on the ground. If the situation changes, we adapt, but the mission stands. We need those nukes. Questions? No one spoke. Good. Wheels up at 2100. Get your gear squared away. Dismissed. The room emptied in the controlled chaos of men preparing for combat. Alexis gathered her folder and headed for the door. Hartwell. She turned. Brennan was standing by the projector, still studying the thermal image. That was either really smart or really stupid, he said without looking at her. Which do you think it was, Master Chief? I think you just made yourself a target. Wolf and half this team already think you're here because of politics. Now you're second-guessing intelligence in front of the Admiral. You're making enemies. I didn't come here to make friends. Brennan finally looked at her. His eyes were the color of winter ice. No, you came here to prove something. That's dangerous. Operators who are trying to prove something make mistakes. They take risks they shouldn't take. They get people killed. Alexis felt something cold settle in her chest. Not anger, colder than that. With respect, Master Chief, I'm not here to prove anything to you or anyone else. I'm here because I'm the best long-range shooter in this unit. If Bravo team walks into an ambush, they're going to need someone who can shoot. And I can shoot. A ghost of something crossed Brennan's face. It might have been approval. Prove it on the range. One shot. Right now. You make it, I'll trust you with my life on that ridge. You miss, I'm recommending to the Admiral we swap you out for Baker. He's not as good, but he's been downrange. Alexis met his eyes. What's the range? 1,200 meters. Wind is gusting to 20 knots. Cold bore. No sighters. It was an impossible shot. The kind of shot you didn't take in combat because the odds were too low and the cost of missing was too high. But this wasn't combat. This was a test. And Alexis had been taking tests her entire life. Let's go. The range at Bagram was a strip of desert that stretched out toward distant mountains. The wind came off the peaks in irregular gusts that made the heat shimmer dance like water. 1,200 meters downrange, a steel target the size of a man's torso stood alone against the beige infinity. Brennan set up the spotting scope while Alexis checked her rifle. The Mk-22 was new. She'd only put 200 rounds through it. The barrel was still factory tight, which meant it would shoot a hair different than a worn-in gun. She'd have to account for that. Wind's variable, Brennan said, eye to the spotting scope. I'm seeing gusts from 8 to 20 knots. Full value, left to right. Temperature is 32 Celsius. Elevation here is 4,000 feet, but you're shooting across a depression, so effective elevation is closer to 3,500. Alexis did the math in her head. 1,200 meters. In American terms, just over 1,300 yards. 3/4 of a mile. The bullet would be in the air for almost 2 seconds. In that time, gravity would pull it down, wind would push it sideways, and the rotation of the earth itself would cause drift. She settled into position behind the rifle. Prone, bipod loaded, cheek weld firm, eye relief perfect. The reticle of the Schmidt and Bender scope was crisp against the hazy target. No pressure, Brennan said, but Wolf is watching from the tower with binoculars, along with about 15 other guys. Word travels fast on a FOB. Alexis didn't respond. She was building the shot in her mind. The wind was the biggest variable. She watched the mirage, the way it boiled and shifted. She watched the dust devils forming and dying in the middle distance. She felt the wind on the back of her neck and translated that feeling into numbers. 1,200 meters. Bullet drop would be approximately 41 feet. She dialed 28.5 mils of elevation into the turret. Click, click, click. Each click was 1/10 of a mil. Each mil was 3.6 inches at 100 meters. The math was automatic now, burned into her brain through 10,000 repetitions. Wind. Right now it was gusting to 18 knots. Left to right. Full value. She'd need to hold approximately 6 feet left of center, but the wind wasn't constant. She needed to time the shot for a lull, or for a consistent gust. Inconsistency was death. She watched, waited. The wind was a living thing. It had rhythms, patterns. There, a sustained gust, 15 knots, holding steady for 3 seconds. 4, 5. Alexis took a breath, let half of it out, found the natural respiratory pause where her body was most still. Her heart rate was 52 beats per minute, slow and steady. The reticle hovered on a 0.6 feet left of the target. Empty space. She was aiming at nothing and trusting physics to bring the bullet home. The trigger broke clean. Surprise break, the way it was supposed to be. The recoil was a gentle push. The muzzle brake did its job, keeping the rifle flat. Through the scope, Alexis saw the bullet trace, a faint distortion in the air, like looking through water. The trace arced up, then down, then... The steel target rang like a bell. The sound took another second to reach them, a clear, pure note that said, hit. Brennan didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he pulled back from the spotting scope. Center mass. Call it a 9-inch group at 1,200 meters in variable wind. He looked at her with something that might have been respect. That's the best cold bore shot I've seen in 30 years. Alexis safed the rifle and stood. Her legs were shaky. Not from the shot, from the weight of what that shot meant. "Do you trust me now, Master Chief?" Brennan's face was unreadable. "I trust that you can shoot." Trust is something different. Trust is built downrange, when everything's on fire and the plan's gone to hell. That's when I'll know if I can trust you. He started breaking down the spotting scope. "But you can shoot. That's a start." 2,100 hours came fast. The MH-47 Chinook helicopter was a beast of a machine. Twin rotors, enough lift capacity to haul a small truck, loud enough to wake the dead. Alexis sat in the red-lit interior, surrounded by Bravo team. 12 men, all of them bigger than her, all of them with more deployment time, all of them watching her with varying degrees of skepticism. Chief Wolf sat directly across from her. His kit was immaculate. Plate carrier loaded with magazines, helmet mounted with night vision. The tools of close-quarters violence arranged with the precision of a surgeon's instruments. He leaned forward, speaking loud enough to be heard over the rotor wash. "First time in country, Hartwell?" It wasn't a question. It was a statement designed to undermine. "Yes, Chief." "Thought so. You've got that look. Clean gear, new rifle, eyes wide open." He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Don't worry, that'll change. Usually takes about 30 seconds after the first bullet cracks past your head." One of the other operators laughed. Alexis kept her face neutral. Brennan sat next to her, cleaning his spotting scope with a lens cloth. He didn't look up. "Wolf, how many of your team has seen someone make a 1,200-meter shot and 20-knot winds?" The laughter stopped. "Because I just watched Hartwell do it. Cold bore. First round. So maybe instead of running your mouth, you focus on not stepping on an IED when we hit the ground." Wolf's face hardened. "Master Chief, with all respect, range performance doesn't mean... It means she can shoot, which is literally her only job on this operation. Your job is to kick doors and clear rooms. Her job is to keep you alive while you do it. I suggest you let her do her job." The tension in the helicopter was thick enough to cut, but Wolf backed down. Brennan's rank and reputation carried weight that Alexis's shooting scores never would. The crew chief called out, "5 minutes." The team started final checks. Magazines seated, nods powered on, comms tested. The ritual of men preparing to step into the dark. Alexis checked her own gear. The MK-22 was broken down in her pack. She'd reassemble it on the ridge. The SIG P226 pistol on her hip was loaded with 15 rounds of 9mm. Not much use at 1,200 meters, but comforting to have. Her plate carrier held 6 magazines of 7.62 NATO for the rifle, 120 rounds. If she needed more than that, something had gone catastrophically wrong. Brennan leaned close, speaking directly into her ear to be heard over the rotors. "When we get on that ridge, I call the wind. You take the shots. We work as a team. No heroics, no proving anything. We observe, we report, we support. That's the mission. Clear?" "Clear, Master Chief." "And Hartwell, if I tell you to shoot, you shoot. If I tell you to hold, you hold. I don't care what you see through that scope. I don't care what your gut tells you. You follow my commands. Understood?" Alexis met his eyes. There was something there. Something harder than professional concern. Understood. The crew chief held up one finger. 1 minute. The helicopter banked hard, beginning its descent. Through the open ramp, Alexis could see the mountains rising like broken teeth against the star-filled sky. Somewhere down there in that darkness was a valley full of men who wanted to kill them. And somewhere in that valley was the truth about whether she belonged here. The skids touched down. The ramp dropped. "Go, go, go!" Bravo team poured out into the night. Alexis followed, her boots hitting Afghan dirt for the first time. The rotor wash tried to blow her over. The noise was overwhelming. The darkness was absolute, except for the green glow of night vision. Then the Chinook lifted, banking away, and the silence rushed in like a flood. They were alone in the mountains. Brennan's hand signal was clear. "Follow me." Alexis adjusted her pack and started climbing. 11,400 feet. The air was thin enough that every step felt like breathing through a straw. The temperature had dropped to -18 Celsius, cold enough that exposed skin would freeze in minutes. Cold enough that the moisture in Alexis's breath crystallized before it hit the ground. They'd been climbing for 3 hours, straight up. The ridge was a knife edge of shale and ice that seemed designed specifically to break ankles and punish hubris. Alexis's quads burned. Her lungs burned. The straps of her pack dug into her shoulders like claws. Brennan climbed ahead of her, moving with the steady, mechanical precision of a machine. 61 years old, and he was pulling away. Alexis gritted her teeth and pushed harder. They crested the ridge just as the sky began to lighten. Not dawn, not yet, but the promise of dawn. That gray pre-light that turned the world into shades of charcoal and ash. Brennan held up a fist. "Stop." Alexis froze, dropping to a knee. Her breath came in ragged gasps that she tried to control. Breathing too hard meant noise. Noise meant compromise. Brennan pulled out his rangefinder and began scanning the valley below. Alexis used the moment to pull the MK-22 from her pack and reassemble it. Barrel to receiver, bolt carrier group, magazine, scope mounted and zeroed. The familiar weight of the rifle was comforting, like holding hands with an old friend. "Valley floor is 4,200 meters below us," Brennan whispered, his voice barely audible. "Compound is at our 12 o'clock, range 1,400 meters. I'm seeing heat signatures, multiple personnel, estimated 20 to 30 individuals." He passed the thermal binos to Alexis. Through the optic, the world became a painting in heat. The compound glowed white-hot against the cold ground. Individual figures moved like ghosts, but it was the patterns that caught Alexis's attention. The same patterns she'd seen in the satellite imagery. "Master Chief, look at the western ridge. Those heat signatures. They're spaced exactly the same as the satellite photos. 40-meter intervals. And look at the gear. Those aren't AKs. Those are belt-fed weapons." Brennan took the binos back, studying the signatures. DSHK heavy machine guns. 12 7mm, Russian-made. Those are anti-vehicle weapons. You don't use those for perimeter security unless you're expecting armored assault. Alexis felt her pulse quicken. Or unless you're expecting helicopters. "Master Chief, I think they know we're coming." Brennan was quiet for a long moment, scanning the compound systematically. "There's more. Look at the main structure, that roof." Alexis looked. Through the thermal, she saw something that made her blood run cold. A large, rectangular heat signature. Steady, consistent. The thermal bloom of serious electrical equipment. "That's not a generator," she said quietly. "That's too big, too clean. That's a JITL system, Russian electronic warfare suite. Jamming, signals intelligence, the works." Brennan lowered the binos. His face was grim. "This isn't local warlords, Hartwell. This is professional. Someone with access to Russian military hardware set this up. Should we call it in? Abort the mission? And tell the Admiral what? That we think, maybe, possibly, the enemy has better gear than expected? Intel said low threat. We'd need concrete proof to abort at this point." Brennan set up the spotting scope, settling into a hide position behind a cluster of rocks. Alexis deployed the bipod on the MK-22 and settled in next to him. From here, they had a perfect view of the entire valley, the compound, the approach routes, every possible avenue of attack or escape. Bravo team is 10 minutes out from phase line Alpha, Brennan said, checking his tactical display. Once they cross that line, they're committed. Point of no return. Alexis scanned through her rifle scope, her training taking over. Sector by sector, left to right, near to far, looking for threats, looking for anything that didn't belong. That's when she saw him. On the roof of the main compound building, a figure emerged from a doorway. But this wasn't an insurgent in traditional dress. This was someone wearing modern tactical gear. Ops Corps helmet, Cry precision combat pants, L3 night vision goggles flipped up on the helmet, a plate carrier loaded with magazine pouches that looked American in design. The figure moved to the edge of the roof, scanning the ridgeline with what looked like a high-powered spotting scope. "Master Chief," Alexis said quietly. "Main compound, rooftop. You seeing this?" Brennan swung his spotting scope to the target. What the hell? Through the scope, Alexis could see details now. The figure was Caucasian, maybe late 50s, short-cropped gray hair. The confidence in his movement spoke of years of training. Decades. This wasn't some hired mercenary playing soldier. This was a professional. On his shoulder, she saw a patch. She couldn't make out the details at this range, but the shape was familiar. The outline of a sword. Wings. The insignia of Delta Force, Brennan breathed. That's a Delta combat patch. Old style. The kind they stopped using in the mid-90s. Could be fake. Stolen. Could be. Or it could be real. The figure on the roof lowered his spotting scope and pulled out a radio. Alexis watched his body language, the way he moved, the way he scanned. Professional, efficient, bored almost. Like a man who had done this 1,000 times before. Then he turned, and for just a moment, the scope caught his face in profile. Brennan went rigid. No, that's not possible. "Master Chief?" Brennan's voice was barely a whisper. "That's Marcus Sullivan. He was my commanding officer in Mogadishu, October 3rd, 1993. He died in that fight. I saw the body bag. I was at the memorial service." Alexis kept her eye to the scope, watching the figure on the roof. "Are you sure?" "I served under him for 3 years. I'd know that face anywhere." Brennan's hands were shaking slightly on the spotting scope. If that's Sullivan, if he's alive, then he's been operating in the shadows for 10 years. And if he's here, if he's running this operation... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The man on the roof raised his radio to his lips. Alexis couldn't hear what he was saying, but she could read his body language. Calm, controlled, giving orders. Then he did something that made Alexis's blood freeze. He turned and looked directly at their ridge. Not scanning, not searching, looking, like he knew exactly where they were. And then he smiled. "Master Chief, he's looking right at us." Impossible. We're concealed. Thermal blankets. No heat signature. No way he can... A high-pitched whine filled Alexis's ears. Not external. Internal. Coming through her radio headset. A digital screech that spiked pain through her skull. Brennan ripped his headset off. "Jammer! He just activated the electronic warfare suite." Alexis tore her own headset away. The whine was everywhere now. Every radio frequency jammed. Every communication channel flooded with white noise. They were cut off. No contact with Bravo team. No contact with command. No way to warn anyone that they were walking into a trap set by a ghost who should have been dead for 10 years. Through the scope, Alexis watched Sullivan on the roof. He was still looking at their position, still smiling. Then he raised his hand in a casual wave, mocking, confident. He knew they were there. He'd always known. This wasn't an operation. It was an ambush, and they'd walked right into it. Brennan grabbed his tactical display, trying to raise Bravo team on alternate frequencies. Nothing. Just static. "They're deaf and blind," he said, "and they're 3 minutes from the kill zone." Alexis watched through her scope as figures began moving on the valley floor. Not panicked, coordinated, taking up positions. The DSHK machine guns began traversing, aiming at the exact point where Bravo team would emerge from the pass. She could see the math playing out. 12 men walking into overlapping fields of fire from belt-fed weapons. IEDs wired along their approach. No communication, no warning. It would be a massacre. "Master Chief, we have to stop them." "We can't. No comms. No way to signal without giving away our position entirely. And ROE says we can't fire unless fired upon. They'll be dead before they can fire back." Brennan's face was hard. "Then they die following orders. That's the job, Hartwell. Sometimes the job means watching your friends die and not being able to do anything about it." Alexis felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest, a clarity, a certainty. "No, that's not your call. Someone has to make the call, and if you won't, I will." She swung the rifle, scanning for the machine gun position. Range, 1,380 meters. Wind, 18 knots, left to right. Temperature, -20. The shot was possible. Difficult, but possible. Brennan grabbed her shoulder. "Hartwell, if you fire that weapon, you will be court-martialed. You will lose your trident. You will lose everything you've worked for. Is that worth it?" Alexis thought about Chief Wolf's words on the helicopter, about being untested, about freezing under pressure. She thought about every instructor who had told her she didn't belong, every teammate who had looked at her and seen a liability instead of an asset. She thought about 12 men walking into certain death while she lay on a mountain and did nothing. Yes. She settled the crosshair on the DSHK machine gun. The gunner was already behind the weapon, already aiming. His finger was on the butterfly trigger. In 30 seconds, Bravo team would emerge into his field of fire. 20 seconds. Alexis did the calculations. Elevation, windage, temperature, Coriolis effect, spin drift, all the variables that turned shooting into mathematics and mathematics into faith. 15 seconds. Brennan released her shoulder. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. "If you're going to do this, do it right." Wind just shifted. "Call it 20 knots now. Steady gust. Hold 4 mils left." 10 seconds. Alexis adjusted her hold. The crosshair hovered in empty space, left of the target. Trusting the math, trusting the training. 5 seconds. She found the respiratory pause, the moment between heartbeats where the body was perfectly still. "Command," she said into the dead radio. "Signal is breaking up. I repeat, signal is..." She pulled the trigger. The rifle roared. The muzzle brake vented gas in a perfect ring. The recoil was a familiar friend. Through the scope, Alexis saw the bullet trace arc across the valley. 1,380 meters away, the DSHK heavy machine gun exploded. The receiver shattered. The feed tray disintegrated. The gunner was thrown backward in a spray of metal fragments and blood. The echo of the shot rolled through the valley like thunder. For one perfect moment, there was silence. Then the radios erupted with static-filled voices. The jammer couldn't completely block close-range tactical frequencies. "Contact! Contact! Taking fire from the ridge!" "Bravo team, this is Sierra 1. Ambush at your 12 o'clock high. DSHK positions. IEDs on the valley floor. Do not advance to phase line alpha." Admiral Hawthorne's voice cut through, distant and distorted. "Sierra 1. Cease fire. Who authorized that shot? You are in violation of rules of engagement." Alexis ignored the voice. She was already scanning for the next target. Below in the valley, the ambush had been spoiled. The insurgents were opening fire prematurely, before Bravo team had reached the kill zone. Without the heavy machine gun, it was rifle fire. Sporadic. Survivable. "Good hit," Brennan said quietly. He was watching through the spotting scope, his face unreadable. "Target neutralized. But you just kicked the hornet's nest." On the valley floor, Bravo team had taken cover behind a low stone wall. They were pinned, but alive. Alexis watched Chief Wolf through her scope. He was yelling into his radio, coordinating his team. Alive because she had violated orders. Through the scope, she saw Sullivan on the rooftop again. He wasn't smiling now. He was furious, barking orders into his radio, pointing at their ridge. "He's calling fire on our position," Brennan said. "We need to displace." "Not yet. Bravo's still pinned." "Hartwell, we have maybe 30 seconds before—" The whistle of an incoming mortar round cut him off. "Down!" Alexis rolled away from the rifle as the world exploded. The mortar round impacted 20 meters to their left, close enough that the concussion wave slammed into her like a physical blow. Close enough that she felt the heat wash over her thermal suit. Close enough that rock fragments peppered her position like hail. Her ears rang. The world was muffled cotton and high-pitched whine. Brennan was pulling her arm, yelling something she couldn't hear. She grabbed the rifle and followed him, scrambling across the shale ridge as another mortar round impacted behind them. Then another. The enemy gunners were bracketing their position, walking the fire up the ridge, trying to pin down the coordinates. They made it 15 meters before the next round hit. This one was closer. The explosion lifted Alexis off her feet and threw her into a cluster of rocks. Her helmet slammed into stone. Stars exploded across her vision. The rifle was torn from her hands. When her vision cleared, she was lying on her back, staring up at the gray pre-dawn sky. Every part of her body hurt. Her ears were ringing so loud she couldn't hear her own breathing. She turned her head. Brennan was 3 meters away, lying on his side. His leg was wrong. The angle was wrong. Alexis crawled to him, her hand shaking. "Master Chief!" He was conscious. His face was gray with shock. Blood was pooling beneath his right thigh. A piece of shrapnel, superheated by the explosion, had punched through his quad muscle. It had missed the femoral artery by millimeters, but the bleeding was bad. Can't feel my foot," Brennan gasped. Alexis ripped her individual first aid kit from her belt. The tourniquet was there, a strip of Velcro and a windlass that could mean the difference between life and death. She looped it high on his thigh, above the wound, and began cranking the windlass. Brennan screamed. The sound cut through the ringing in her ears. 1 turn, 2 turns, 3. The bleeding slowed, then stopped. Another whistle. Incoming. Move. Alexis grabbed Brennan's drag handle and pulled. He was 220 pounds of muscle and gear. Dead weight. Physics said she couldn't move him. Every instructor who had ever doubted her said she couldn't move him. She pulled anyway. They moved a foot, then another. The mortar round impacted where they had been lying 5 seconds before. The blast wave shoved Alexis forward, slamming her chest into the rocks, but she didn't let go of the drag handle. She could see an outcropping of rock 20 meters away. Cover. If she could get him there. If she could just... Brennan grabbed her wrist. His grip was weak. Leave me. Get the rifle. Provide cover for Bravo. That's the mission. Alexis looked at him. At the blood. At the gray pallor of his face. She thought about every time someone had told her she wasn't strong enough. That she didn't have the physical capability. That when a 200-pound operator went down, she wouldn't be able to save him. "Shut up, Master Chief," she said. "I'm not leaving you." She heaved backward. Her quads burned. Her back screamed. The altitude made every breath feel like drowning. But she moved him, inch by agonizing inch. The mortars kept falling, walking up the ridge, searching. But Alexis didn't stop. She pulled until her hands were raw inside her gloves. She pulled until her vision started to gray at the edges. She pulled until they reached the outcropping and she could roll him into cover. She collapsed next to him, gasping. Her heart was hammering so hard she thought it might burst. Every muscle trembled with exhaustion. Brennan's eyes found hers. There was something in them, something like understanding. "You're not supposed to be able to do that," he whispered. "I'm not supposed to be here at all," Alexis said. "But here I am." She crawled to the edge of the outcropping and looked down at the valley. The sun was rising now, real dawn, the kind that turned the mountains gold and made the snow sparkle like diamonds. Through the morning light, she could see Bravo team, still pinned, still taking fire, and she could see her rifle lying in the open 20 meters away where it had been torn from her hands. Without that rifle, she was useless, just another body on a mountain, unable to help the men dying below. She looked at Brennan. "I have to get the rifle. You go out there, you're dead. They're bracketing the whole ridge. Next mortar volley will land right on top of it. Then I better be fast." Before he could argue, before she could talk herself out of it, Alexis launched herself from cover. 20 meters. That was all. Just 20 meters across open ground while enemy gunners tried to kill her. She ran. The first mortar whistled in before she'd gone 5 steps. It impacted behind her, the blast wave shoving her forward. She kept running. 15 meters. 10. Another whistle. This one closer. 5 meters. The explosion threw her sideways. Shrapnel whined past her head, but her hand closed around the rifle's stock. She grabbed it and dove, rolling back toward cover as another mortar round obliterated the spot where the rifle had been. She slammed into the outcropping, gasping. The rifle was intact. Somehow. Impossibly. Brennan stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "That was the stupidest thing I've ever seen." "Or the bravest," Alexis gasped. Bravery and stupidity looked the same from a distance. She checked the rifle. Scope was intact. Action was clear. She pulled the bolt back. A round was still chambered, ready to fire. Below in the valley, Bravo team was in trouble. She could see them through the scope now. Chief Wolf was dragging a wounded operator behind the wall. Another SEAL was returning fire with his rifle, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. And on the eastern ridge, she saw movement, a new threat. A team of insurgents was setting up another machine gun. APKM, Russian-made, belt-fed. If they got that gun into action, It would have a perfect flanking angle on Bravo's position. Range, 1,640 meters. 1 mile. The shot was impossible. In these conditions, with her body shaking from exertion and adrenaline, with her hands frozen and her vision still spotted from the concussion. But Bravo team didn't need possible. They needed impossible. Alexis settled into position. She forced her breathing to slow, forced her hands to steady. She dialed the elevation turret until the numbers blurred. 21.5 mils. More elevation than she'd ever used in her life. Range? Brennan asked weakly. 1 mile. That's impossible. I know. She settled the crosshair on the PKM gunner, except she wasn't really aiming at him. She was aiming at empty space 3 feet left of him, trusting the wind, trusting the math, trusting everything she'd ever learned. The gunner racked the bolt on his weapon. In 5 seconds, he would open fire. In 10 seconds, Bravo team would start taking casualties. Alexis found the pause between heartbeats. She pulled the trigger. The recoil slammed into her shoulder. The muzzle brake vented. The bullet left the barrel at 3,000 feet per second and began its long arc across the valley. 1 second. The bullet was supersonic, tearing through the cold morning air. 2 seconds. It transitioned to subsonic, destabilizing slightly as physics changed. 3 seconds. Through the scope, Alexis saw the PKM gunner's head snap back. A pink mist vaporized in the dawn light. The man crumpled over his weapon, dead before his brain could process what had happened. The shot had flown 1 mile through gusting wind and hit within an inch of her aim point. Brennan was staring at her. I've never, in 30 years. Alexis worked the bolt, chambering a fresh round. I told you I could shoot. But she didn't have time to celebrate, because on the rooftop of the main compound, she saw Sullivan, and he was looking right at their position, right at the muzzle flash that had just given them away. He raised his radio, and Alexis knew with absolute certainty that he wasn't calling for more mortars. He was calling for something worse. The world had narrowed to a single point of light. Through the scope of the MK-22, Alexis watched Marcus Sullivan lower his radio and smile. Not the grim satisfaction of a professional acknowledging a worthy opponent. This was something colder. The smile of a man who had been waiting 10 years for this exact moment. Then he pointed directly at her position and made a throat-cutting gesture. The message was clear. You're already dead. You just don't know it yet. Alexis pulled back from the scope, scanning the valley with her naked eyes. The sun was fully up now, turning the snow-covered peaks into a blinding white wasteland. The temperature had climbed to -15 Celsius, still cold enough to kill, but the kind of cold that made you think you might survive. That was when she heard it. Not a whistle this time, a deeper sound, a rhythmic thumping that she felt in her chest before her ears registered it. Helicopter. Master Chief, she said quietly, we have company. Brennan was pale, his breathing shallow. The tourniquet had stopped the bleeding, but shock was setting in. Hypothermia wasn't far behind. His lips were starting to turn blue. What kind, he managed. Alexis scanned the sky. There, coming low over the eastern ridge. Not American. The profile was wrong. Twin turbines, stub wings for weapon mounts, the distinctive silhouette of a Me-24 Hind attack helicopter. Russian-made, gunship configuration. Hind, she said, armed. Brennan closed his eyes. Of course it is. The helicopter swept across the valley, its rotor wash kicking up clouds of snow. It was conducting a search pattern, looking for them. Sullivan had called in the big gun, and now there was nowhere to hide. A thermal sight on that bird would light them up like flares. Alexis grabbed her radio handset, hoping against hope that the jammer had a gap in its coverage. She keyed the mic. TOC. This is Sierra 1. We are compromised. Enemy gunship inbound. Request immediate air support. How copy? Static. White noise. The jammer was still active. She tried again. Any station, this is Sierra 1. Emergency traffic. We have wounded and are under attack by... A burst of static cut through, followed by a voice. Distant, distorted, but audible. Sierra 1, TOC. Read you broken and garbled. Say again your traffic. Alexis's heart surged. The signal was weak, but it was there. The angle of the ridge must be providing partial shielding from the jammer's directional antenna. TOC, Sierra 1. Sierra 2 is critical casualty, femoral injury. We need immediate medevac. Enemy has deployed attack helicopter and is actively searching for our position. Request. The radio went dead. The jammer had found the frequency and crushed it. Alexis slammed the handset against the rock in frustration. So close. They had been so close. The Hind was closer now, circling. The pilot was good, staying out of effective rifle range while the gunner scanned with thermal optics, looking for the heat signature of two Americans hiding in the rocks. Thermal blanket, Brennan said. His voice was weak but lucid. In my pack, left side pouch. Alexis found it, a thin sheet of metallic fabric designed to block infrared signatures. She draped it over both of them, tucking the edges under rocks. It wouldn't make them invisible, but it might buy them time. Through a gap in the fabric, she watched the Hind complete another orbit. The helicopter was a beautiful machine in its own way, a flying tank, nearly invulnerable to small arms fire, armed with rockets, cannon, and anti-tank missiles. Against two people with a sniper rifle and a pistol, it was overkill of the highest order. The Hind's nose dipped as it began another search pass, closer this time. The rotor wash reached their position, threatening to tear away the thermal blanket. Alexis held it down, her frozen fingers digging into the fabric. If it blew away, they were dead. The gunner would spot them instantly and unleash hell. The helicopter passed overhead, so close she could see the rivets on its armored belly, so close she could see the gunner in the front cockpit, head down, staring at his thermal display. Then it was past, banking away to search another sector of the ridge. Alexis released a breath she hadn't known she was holding. That was close, Brennan whispered. Too close, and they'd gotten lucky. The thermal blanket had worked. But luck was a finite resource in combat. Eventually it ran out, and when it did, people died. Alexis pulled the blanket aside just enough to look at Brennan. His face was gray. His eyes were starting to glaze. The combination of blood loss, shock, and hypothermia was shutting down his body one system at a time. She checked the tourniquet, still tight, still holding. But he needed real medical care, a surgeon, blood transfusions, warmth, things that didn't exist on a frozen mountain in Afghanistan. Stay with me, Master Chief, she said, slapping his cheek lightly. Don't you dare check out on me. His eyes focused slightly. Alexis. It was the first time he'd used her first name. What? He reached into his vest with a trembling hand and pulled out a photograph. The edges were worn. The image was faded. But Alexis could see it clearly. A young woman in army combat uniform, Dark hair pulled back, strong features, a confident smile. The woman looked exactly like Alexis. "Your mother," Brennan said. "Lieutenant Sarah Hartwell. She was our combat medic in Mogadishu, 1993, October 3rd. Alexis took the photo with numb fingers. She'd seen pictures of her mother before, official photos, dress uniform portraits, but never like this, never in the field, never with that look in her eyes that said she knew exactly what she was walking into and chose to do it anyway. "She saved 12 men that day," Brennan continued. His voice was distant now, lost in memory. "We were pinned down in the Bakara market, surrounded, taking casualties. Your mother ran through machine gun fire 3 times to drag wounded soldiers to cover. 3 times. No body armor, just her aid bag and her courage." "What happened to her?" Alexis asked, though part of her already knew. "Marcus Sullivan happened to her." Brennan coughed, a wet sound that made Alexis's stomach clench. "Sullivan was our commander, Delta Force, the best of the best. But he was reckless. He pushed too hard, went too deep into enemy territory without proper support. When the ambush came, when we were surrounded, he called for your mother to come forward, to treat a wounded operator who was already dead. She knew it was suicide. I heard her on the radio. She said the man was gone, that advancing would just create more casualties." His hand gripped the photograph. "Sullivan ordered her anyway. Direct order. She had to follow it. That's the military. You follow orders even when they're wrong. Especially when they're wrong." Alexis felt something cold settle in her chest. She went. She went. And an RPG hit the building she was in. We found her body 3 hours later, along with the dead operator she'd been sent to save. Sullivan wrote it up as heroic action, got her a Bronze Star with Valor posthumously, made himself look good in the after-action report. Brennan's eyes found Alexis's. 2 weeks later, Sullivan disappeared, declared KIA when his convoy was hit. But there was no body, just pieces of a vehicle. We all assumed he'd been vaporized. Turns out he just went ghost, reinvented himself, started selling his skills to the highest bidder. The pieces were falling into place now, the personal nature of this ambush, the way Sullivan had known exactly where to look for them. "He knows who I am," Alexis said. "He's known since you applied to BUD/S. Sullivan still has contacts in the intelligence community. When Sarah Hartwell's daughter tried out for the SEALs, word got around. He's been tracking your career, waiting for the right moment. This whole operation, the nukes, the ambush, it's all for me?" Brennan shook his head weakly. "The nukes are real. The threat is real. But Sullivan killed 2 birds with 1 stone. He gets paid by the terrorists for security, and he gets revenge on the daughter of the woman whose death he caused. You were always the real target, Alexis. The rest is just business." The Hind made another pass, farther away this time. The pilot was expanding his search pattern. Alexis watched it through the gap in the thermal blanket, her mind racing. Sullivan had orchestrated this entire thing. The leaked intelligence, the ambush, even getting Alexis assigned to Overwatch had probably been part of his plan. He'd maneuvered her into position like a chess piece, and now he was moving in for checkmate. Her radio crackled. Not the encrypted tactical frequency, the open emergency channel that anyone could monitor. Sullivan's voice came through, clear and mocking. "Alexis Hartwell, I know you can hear me. Your mother's daughter, Sarah's little girl, all grown up and playing soldier." Alexis grabbed the handset but didn't respond. Answering would confirm her position. I've been watching you, Alexis, tracking your progress. You're good, better than your mother was. That mile shot? Impressive. Reminded me of your old man. Oh, didn't Brennan tell you? I knew your father, too. Army Ranger. Good man. Died in a training accident when you were 3. At least that's what they told you. Alexis's hand tightened on the handset. Her father had died in a parachute malfunction at Fort Benning. A tragic accident. Nothing suspicious. Sullivan's voice continued, warm and conversational. But we both know accidents happen all the time in the military, especially to people who ask too many questions about what happened to their wives in Mogadishu. Your father started digging into Sarah's death, started asking why she was ordered forward, who gave that order. He was getting close to the truth. No, it wasn't possible. Her father had died in an accident. The Army had investigated. There had been a report. I couldn't let him expose what really happened that day, Alexis. Just like I can't let you walk off this mountain. You're too much like both of them. Too stubborn, too brave, too willing to die for people who don't deserve it. Brennan grabbed Alexis's wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. Don't listen to him. He's trying to get in your head, make you angry, make you make mistakes. But Alexis was already past anger. She was in a place beyond emotion, a cold, clear space where there was only the mission, the target, the shot. Sullivan's voice crackled again. I'm giving you a choice, Alexis. Same choice I gave your mother. Leave Brennan. Walk away. There's an extraction point 2 clicks north of your position. I'll let you reach it. You can go home. Tell them you got separated in the fighting. No one will question it. You survive. The Hind banked back toward their position. Or you can stay with the old man. Try to drag him out like your mother tried to save that dead operator. And you'll die just like she did. Brave and stupid and utterly pointless. Your choice. You have 60 seconds to decide. The radio went silent. Alexis looked at Brennan. He was watching her with eyes that had seen too much death. Too many good people making bad choices because it was the right thing to do. Go, he said quietly. Complete the mission. Get back to base. Tell them what happened here. That's how you beat him. Not by dying on this ridge. Alexis checked the tourniquet on his leg, still tight. Then she checked her rifle. 3 rounds left in the magazine. She had 2 more magazines in her vest, 33 rounds total. Not much, but it would have to be enough. I'm not my mother, she said, and I'm not leaving you. Alexis, my mother followed a bad order and died. I'm not following orders anymore. I'm making my own calls. She grabbed Brennan's drag handle and started pulling him toward the backside of the ridge, away from the valley, away from the Hind's search pattern. The terrain was rougher here, steeper, but it offered more cover, more options. Brennan was dead weight, 220 pounds of muscle and gear that physics said she couldn't move. Her instructors at BUD/S had been very clear about that. The human body had limits. Female bodies had different limits than male bodies. That was just biology. Alexis didn't care about biology. She pulled. Her boots slipped on the icy shale. Her quads burned. Her lower back screamed. Every breath at this altitude was like inhaling broken glass, but she kept moving, 1 foot, then another, dragging him, inch by agonizing inch. The Hind appeared over the ridge, its massive rotor blades chopping the thin air. The pilot had spotted movement. The gunship pivoted, nose dipping, the 30-millimeter cannon in the chin turret tracking toward them. Alexis dove, pulling Brennan with her. They tumbled down a steep slope, rolling, slamming into rocks. The world spun, sky and stone and snow mixing together in a kaleidoscope of pain. The cannon opened fire. a sound like a giant zipper being torn open. 30-millimeter rounds chewed up the ridge where they'd been lying 2 seconds before. Each round was the size of a beer bottle. Each impact threw up a geyser of rock and ice. They hit the bottom of the slope in a tangle of limbs and equipment. Alexis's helmet had been torn off somewhere in the fall. Blood ran down the side of her face from a gash above her eyebrow. The rifle was still slung across her chest. Somehow, miraculously, Brennan wasn't moving. His eyes were closed. For a terrible moment, Alexis thought he was dead. Then she saw his chest rise, shallow, weak, but breathing. Above them, the hind circled like a vulture. The pilot was repositioning for another gun run. Alexis looked around desperately. They were in a narrow ravine, sheer walls on both sides, no cover, no escape route. The helicopter's shadow fell over them as it lined up its approach. This was it. This was how it ended. Not in some heroic last stand, but pinned in a ditch while a Russian gunship turned them into hamburger. Alexis unslung her rifle. 3 rounds. She could try to hit the helicopter, maybe get lucky and damage a rotor blade or hit something critical. The odds were astronomical. Trying to hit a moving helicopter with a bolt-action rifle was like trying to shoot a flying eagle with a stone. But doing nothing meant death. At least this way, she'd die fighting. She brought the rifle up, tracking the hind through her scope. The helicopter was close now. 300 meters. 250. The cannon was traversing, lining up the shot. Alexis centered the crosshair on the cockpit, on the gunner's position. If she could just... Her radio erupted with sound, not Sullivan's voice this time, a different voice, American, urgent. Break, break, break! Viper 2-1 engaging hostile aircraft. The sky above the hind exploded. An F-16 Fighting Falcon screamed across the valley at 500 knots, its afterburner painting a trail of fire across the dawn sky. The pilot had come in low, using the terrain to mask his approach. Now he pulled vertical, climbing hard, and the hind pilot saw him too late. Air-to-air missile launch. A sidewinder dropped from the F-16's wing, ignited, and streaked toward the helicopter in a corkscrew of white smoke. The hind pilot threw his aircraft into a desperate evasive maneuver, dumping flares and chaff. The missile locked on a flare and detonated in a ball of orange flame 50 meters behind the helicopter. But the F-16 wasn't done. The pilot rolled inverted and dove, his 20-millimeter cannon spooling up. The air filled with tracer rounds, a river of fire that reached down from the sky and touched the hind's tail rotor. Metal shredded. The helicopter spun violently, its pilot fighting for control. Splash 1 hind, the F-16 pilot called, his voice calm and professional. Sierra 1, Viper 2-1, we have your position. Cavalry's here. The hind was spiraling now, smoke pouring from its tail section. The pilot managed to level it just enough to avoid a complete crash, bringing it down hard on the valley floor half a click away. The impact crumpled the landing gear. The rotors disintegrated, but the crew compartment held. Men poured out of the wreck, scrambling for cover. Alexis keyed her radio with shaking hands. Viper 2-1, Sierra 1. That was outstanding shooting. We have 1 urgent surgical. Request immediate medevac. Negative, Sierra. Airspace is still contested. We're working to suppress remaining threats, but we can't bring in a helo until we clear the valley. ETA on safe extraction is 30 mics. 30 minutes. Brennan didn't have 30 minutes. Alexis looked down at him. His skin was waxy. His breathing was barely perceptible. The hypothermia and shock were winning. Even if they got him to a hospital in the next 5 minutes, he might not make it. Copy, Viper. Sierra 1 will hold position and await extraction. But she couldn't just sit here and watch him die. There had to be something. Some way to... Her radio crackled again. Admiral Hawthorne's voice. Cold, clipped, furious. Sierra 1, TOC actual. SITRP. Alexis took a breath. TOC. Sierra 1. We are in a defensive position on the North Ridge. Sierra 2 is critical casualty. Femoral wound. Significant blood loss. Severe hypothermia. He needs immediate evacuation. Understood. And what is your current tactical situation?
We've been under attack by mortars and attack helicopter. Viper 2-1 just splashed the Hind. Enemy ground forces are still active in the valley. Bravo team is combat effective and has secured the compound.
There was a long pause. Sierra 1. Bravo team has located the nuclear material. Mission objectives are met. However, we have lost contact with the primary target. Sullivan is in the wind. Intel indicates he may attempt to escape via the northern passes. Alexis's blood ran cold. She knew what was coming next.
Sierra 1, you are in position to observe the northern approaches. You are ordered to establish overwatch on the escape routes and interdict Sullivan if he attempts exfiltration. Do you copy?
She looked at Brennan, at his closed eyes, at the shallow rise and fall of his chest. TOC negative. Sierra 2 requires immediate medical attention. I cannot leave him to establish overwatch. Petty Officer Hartwell, that was not a request. That was a direct order. Master Chief Brennan is stable. You've applied a tourniquet. He can survive another 30 minutes while you complete your mission. Sullivan cannot be allowed to escape. He has intelligence on our operations, our personnel, our methods. If he reaches Pakistan, we may never find him again. Sir, with respect, Brennan is dying. Every minute I delay decreases his chance of survival. Hawthorne's voice went arctic, and every minute Sullivan has to escape means more Americans die down the road. You are a military operator, Petty Officer, not a medic, not a babysitter. Your job is to complete the mission. Now establish overwatch and confirm Sullivan's location. That is a direct order. Do you copy? Alexis stared at the radio handset. She thought about her mother, about the order to advance, about the choice between following commands and doing what was right. She thought about Brennan's words from the helicopter. Trust is built downrange when everything's on fire and the plan's gone to hell. Everything was on fire. The plan had gone to hell. TOC Sierra 1, signal is breaking up. I repeat, signal is... She ripped the transmit cable out of the radio unit. The voice of Admiral Hawthorne cut off mid-syllable, replaced by blessed silence. Brennan's eyes opened slightly. Did you just hang up on an admiral? Signal interference, Alexis said. Atmospheric conditions are unpredictable in these mountains. The ghost of a smile crossed Brennan's face. You're going to get court-martialed. Probably. Was it worth it? Alexis looked at him, really looked at him. This man who had doubted her, who had tested her, who had taught her that shooting was mathematics and trust was earned through fire. Ask me when you're walking again. She checked the tourniquet one more time, then began packing snow around his body. It seemed counterintuitive, but the snow would actually insulate him, keep his core temperature from dropping further. It was a trick her father had taught her when they used to hunt elk in the Montana mountains. Her father, the Army Ranger who had died asking too many questions. Alexis pushed the thought away. She couldn't think about that now. Couldn't let Sullivan's words poison her focus. There would be time for truth later. Time for justice. If they survived. She pulled out her rifle and scanned the valley below. Through the scope, she could see the compound. Bravo team was moving through it systematically, clearing rooms, securing the nuclear material. Chief Wolf was coordinating the operation, his hand signals crisp and professional. And somewhere in that chaos, Marcus Sullivan was running, the man who had killed her mother, who might have killed her father, who had orchestrated this entire nightmare to get revenge on a ghost.
The professional part of Alexis's brain said to let him go. Focus on keeping Brennan alive. That was the priority. Sullivan was just one man. They'd catch him eventually. But the other part, the part that had grown up looking at her mother's picture and wondering why, the part that had joined the SEALs to honor a legacy she barely understood, that part wanted blood. Movement caught her eye. Northern Ridge. A figure moving fast across the snow. Not running, moving with purpose. Tactical bounds, cover to cover. The movement of someone who knew exactly where the sniper was and exactly how to avoid being shot. Sullivan. Alexis tracked him through the scope. Range, 800 meters. Moving target. Difficult, but not impossible. She had 2 rounds left in the magazine, 1 in the chamber, 3 chances. Her finger found the trigger. She started to apply pressure, then she stopped. If she took this shot, if she killed Sullivan, it would be murder. He was fleeing, not engaging, not threatening anyone at this moment. Shooting him would be execution. And no matter what he'd done, no matter what he deserved, she was not an executioner. She was a SEAL. And SEALs followed rules, even when the rules protected monsters. Alexis lowered the rifle. Sullivan reached the ridge line and disappeared over the crest. Gone. Escaped. Free to sell his skills to the next terrorist. Free to kill more Americans. Free to orchestrate more nightmares. But alive, which meant he could be tracked, hunted, brought to justice the right way. Alexis turned back to Brennan. His eyes were open, watching her. "You had the shot," he said quietly. "I know. Why didn't you take it?" She thought about her answer, about all the reasons, about rules and justice and the difference between soldier and murderer. "Because I'm better than him." Brennan nodded slowly. "Your mother would be proud." The sound of rotors echoed across the valley, different from the hind, friendlier, the distinctive thump of American helicopters. 2 of them. MH-60 Blackhawks coming in fast and low. The radio crackled, not the encrypted frequency, the emergency channel. "Sierra 1, this is Dustoff 3-1. We are inbound for medevac. Viper flight has cleared the airspace. Pop smoke when you have visual." Alexis grabbed a smoke grenade from her vest and pulled the pin. Purple smoke billowed into the morning air, marking their position. The first Blackhawk flared over their location, the rotor wash turning the world into a hurricane of snow and noise. A PJ, a pararescue jumper, fast roped down, his medical bag already open before his boots hit the ground. He took one look at Brennan, and his professional calm cracked slightly. Jesus, how long has he been like this? 90 minutes, maybe more. Tourniquet is holding. The PJ was already checking vital signs, pulling out IV equipment. "You did good. Tourniquet placement is perfect. He's hypothermic and shocky, but he's alive. We'll get him stable." A second PJ descended, moving to Alexis. "You injured?" She looked down at herself, blood on her face from the head wound. Her hands were torn and bleeding inside the gloves. Her ribs ached from where the shrapnel had grazed her. Her left arm hung at a funny angle that suggested something was broken. "I'm fine," she said. "Ma'am, with respect, you look like you fell down a mountain." "I did, twice. Still fine." The PJ started to argue,
then seemed to recognize the look in her eyes. The look that said, I will stand here until my teammate is safe, and if you try to treat me first, I will shoot you. Okay, we'll load him first. They strapped Brennan to a Stokes litter and connected it to the hoist cable. As he was lifted toward the hovering Blackhawk, his hand reached out and grabbed Alexis's sleeve. You carried me, he said. His voice was barely audible over the rotors. They said you couldn't, but you did. I told you, I'm not supposed to be here at all, but here I am. He smiled, actually smiled. Reaper. Then he was rising into the air, spinning slowly on the cable, disappearing into the belly of the helicopter. The PJ grabbed Alexis's arm. Your turn. She started to argue, then her legs gave out. The adrenaline was wearing off. The pain was rushing in to fill the space. The PJ caught her before she hit the ground. I got you, he said, clipping her into a rescue harness. You did good. You can let go now. Alexis felt the cable take her weight, felt herself rising off the mountain. Below her, the battlefield was already becoming abstract, small. The compound where men had died, the ridge where she'd made the impossible shot, the ravine where she'd nearly been killed by a helicopter. It was all getting smaller, farther away, but the weight of it wasn't getting any lighter. She closed her eyes and let the PJs pull her into the aircraft. Strong hands grabbed her vest and hauled her onto the deck. Someone was wrapping her in a thermal blanket. Someone else was checking her vitals. She opened her eyes. Chief Derek Wolf was there, sitting against the bulkhead. His uniform was torn and bloody. A field dressing covered his shoulder. But he was alive. His whole team was alive. He met her eyes across the helicopter cabin. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Wolf did something Alexis had never seen him do. He nodded. Just once. A slight dip of the head that acknowledged everything that had happened on that ridge. The warning shot that had saved his life. The mile shot that had broken the ambush. The refusal to leave a wounded teammate. Clear, Wolf said to the crew chief. We're all home. The Blackhawk banked hard, but before it could accelerate away, the crew chief screamed, Missile launch! Brake right! Brake right! Alexis jerked upright. Through the open door, she saw it. A smoke trail spiraling up from the valley floor. Not from the crashed Hind, from the compound rooftop. Sullivan. He was standing there, clearly visible even at this distance, a Stinger missile launcher on his shoulder. The weapon's seeker head had already locked onto the Blackhawk's heat signature. The pilot threw the aircraft into a violent, evasive maneuver. Flares popped from the defensive suite, white-hot decoys tumbling through the air. But Alexis knew the math. She'd studied Stinger capabilities. The missile was faster than the helicopter. The flares might confuse it. Might. Or everyone on this bird would die. Crew chief! Alexis shouted over the alarm klaxons. Open that door wider. Ma'am, we're evading. You can't. Now! The crew chief hit the release. The door slid fully open, wind screaming into the cabin. Alexis grabbed a cargo strap with her broken arm, pain exploding white-hot through her vision, and leaned out into the slipstream. Her right hand found her SIG P226. 15 rounds, 9mm. Effective range may be 50 meters against a stationary target. The Stinger missile was 800 meters away, closing at Mach 2, over 1,500 miles per hour. It was impossible, even more impossible than the mile shot, a handgun against a hypersonic missile. Physics said no. Logic said no. Every instructor who had ever taught her ballistics said no. But Brennan's voice echoed in her head from earlier on the ridge. You can do what I've never seen in 30 years. Alexis didn't aim at the helicopter. She didn't aim at Sullivan. She aimed at a point in empty space where math and intuition told her the missile would be in exactly half a second, leading a target. Just like shooting skeet, except the skeet was traveling supersonic, and if she missed, 12 people died. She pulled the trigger. 5 rounds. 6. 7. On the 8th round, the universe held its breath. The 9mm bullet, traveling at 1,000 feet per second, intersected the Stinger's flight path at the exact microsecond the missile crossed through that invisible point in space. The bullet struck the warhead's impact fuse. The missile detonated 800 meters from the helicopter. The shock wave rocked the Black Hawk violently, throwing Alexis against the bulkhead, but they were far enough away. The aircraft stabilized. The alarm stopped screaming. They were alive. The crew chief pulled Alexis back from the door, his face white. Did you just— No, Alexis said quickly, holstering the pistol with shaking hands. That didn't happen. Lucky malfunction. Atmospheric interference detonated it early. That's what goes in the report. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, shaken. Sierra 1, I don't know what just happened back there, but we're clear, heading to Bagram. Wolf was staring at her across the cabin. So were the other operators. They'd all seen it. The impossible shot with a handgun that had saved all their lives. Alexis met Wolf's eyes. Atmospheric conditions, she said firmly. Unpredictable at altitude. Wolf slowly nodded, understanding passing between them. Right, I'll write it up that way in my after action. Brennan was conscious on his stretcher, staring at her with something like awe. That shot. Didn't happen, Alexis repeated, louder this time. Everyone clear? The missile malfunctioned. Random detonation. End of story. One by one, the operators nodded. Some things were better left off the official record. Some things would only invite questions nobody wanted to answer. Alexis looked out the window one last time. On the compound rooftop below, Sullivan stood motionless, the empty Stinger launcher at his feet. Even at this distance, she could read his body language. Shock. Disbelief. The realization that he'd just been beaten, not by firepower, not by luck, but by pure skill that transcended anything he'd ever seen. The Black Hawk banked away, accelerating toward Bagram. Alexis leaned her head back against the vibrating bulkhead and finally allowed herself to close her eyes. They weren't home yet. There would be debriefings, investigations, questions about violated orders and severed communications. And somewhere out there, Marcus Sullivan was still alive, still free, still carrying the truth about her mother, about her father. But for now, they were alive. All of them. Sometimes that was enough. The flight to Bagram took 35 minutes. Alexis spent most of it watching the medics work on Brennan, counting each shallow breath, each beep of the cardiac monitor. When his eyes opened briefly and found hers, she nodded. Still here, still fighting. The helicopter touched down on the pad at Bagram. Medical personnel rushed forward with gurneys. Alexis watched them load Brennan into an ambulance, lights already flashing as it raced toward the surgical ward. Then she turned to face her reception committee. Admiral Hawthorne stood 20 feet away, flanked by 2 Marine MPs and a Navy JAG officer. His face could have been carved from ice. Alexis climbed down from the helicopter unsteadily. Her left arm was definitely broken. Every breath sent spikes of pain through her ribs, but she kept her spine straight. She stopped 3 paces from the Admiral and came to attention as best she could. Sir, Petty Officer Hartwell reporting. Hawthorne's jaw worked. Master Chief Brennan's prognosis? Unknown, sir. The PJs said he had a chance. The tourniquet held. We got him out in time. Because you refused a direct order to leave him and establish overwatch on Sullivan's escape route. It wasn't a question. Yes, sir. Because you severed communications when ordered to abandon your wounded spotter.
Atmospheric interference, sir. Don't. Hawthorne's voice cut like a blade. Don't insult my intelligence. You unplugged your transmit cable. You deliberately cut communications. You violated every protocol in the book. Alexis met his eyes. Yes, sir, I did. The admission seemed to surprise him. You also violated rules of engagement by firing before receiving hostile fire. You disobeyed tactical command. You compromised your position, and you allowed a high-value target to escape rather than complete your assigned mission. Yes, sir. In a normal unit, that means court-martial, dishonorable discharge, prison. Alexis said nothing. He was right. Hawthorne stepped closer. But this isn't a normal unit. Master Chief Brennan submitted a report before surgery. He stated you demonstrated exceptional judgment under impossible circumstances, that your decision to engage the DSHK prevented Bravo's destruction, that your mile shot was the finest marksmanship he'd witnessed in 30 years. He paused. Chief Wolf submitted a similar statement. Every member of Bravo team has confirmed that without your actions, they would not have survived. The nuclear material is secured. The terrorist cell is eliminated. By any objective measure, the mission succeeded. Alexis felt something shift. Not hope yet, but possibility. However, there are questions. How a former Delta Force operator came to work with terrorists. How he knew we were coming. How atmospheric interference happens every time you receive an order you don't like. He gestured to the JAG officer. Captain Morrison will debrief you. You will tell him everything. Then we decide what happens next. Sir, Alexis said carefully, Master Chief Brennan told me things about Sullivan. About my mother. Something flickered in Hawthorne's eyes. Knowledge. I know. Your mother was a hero. What happened in Mogadishu was tragic. What happened to your father afterward was equally tragic. Both events have been investigated thoroughly. Sullivan said, Sullivan is a ghost, a man supposedly dead 10 years. Whatever he told you was psychological warfare to compromise your judgment, which worked because you let him escape instead of taking the shot. Alexis's hands clenched. He was fleeing, not engaging. Shooting him would have been following Rue for a hostile combatant with intelligence value. Instead, he's gone. We may never find him. The Admiral turned to leave, then paused. Get medical treatment. Rest. We'll talk after the debrief. He walked away. The JAG officer, Captain Morrison, stepped forward. Thin, wire-rimmed glasses, the air of someone who'd rather be elsewhere. Petty officer, we need a formal debrief. But first, you're getting medical attention. You're bleeding on my investigation. Alexis looked down. Blood dripped from her fingertips onto the tarmac. The hospital smelled like antiseptic. A corpsman cleaned her head wound. 12 stitches. X-rays confirmed a radial fracture. They put her arm in a cast from knuckles to elbow. Master Chief Brennan? Alexis asked. The corpsman hesitated. Surgery, that's all I know. Which meant bad. After medical, Alexis was confined to quarters, not under arrest, but not free. She spent 2 weeks in limbo, debriefings, Captain Morrison's 6-hour interview, recording every detail. The shot that violated ROE,
the refusal to abandon Brennan, the choice not to kill Sullivan. Morrison's report was clinical, facts without judgment, presented for the board that would decide her fate. At night, Alexis researched. Classified databases she technically shouldn't access. Following Marcus Sullivan's ghost. She found his service record, Delta Force, multiple deployments, then Mogadishu, October 1993, Black Hawk Down, 18 Americans dead. Sullivan's name in the after-action reports, Ground Element Commander. Failed rescue attempt. Recommendation for Sarah Hartwell's Bronze Star. Then 2 weeks later, declared KIA. Convoy hit by IED. No body recovered. DNA evidence later questioned. Just enough to make it plausible, but not provable. Financial records. Shell companies. Money flowing through offshore accounts. Sullivan hadn't died. He'd been reborn as a private military contractor. And buried in the transactions, Alexis found it. Regular deposits to a Cayman Islands account. Payments starting 1 month after her father's death. Hush money, or payment for services rendered. Someone knocked. Chief Wolf stood in the hallway, out of uniform, shoulder bandaged. "Hartwell, got a minute?" "Sure." He entered, looking uncomfortable. "I've been thinking about the ridge, about your choices." He pulled out an envelope. "This is my statement for the board. I'm recommending you for a Silver Star, for saving my team, for refusing to abandon Brennan, for demonstrating the courage we should all aspire to." Alexis took the envelope, numb. "Chief, I violated." "You saved lives. That's what matters. The rest is paperwork." He turned to leave. "The board hearing is in 3 days. Admiral's pushing for discipline. But you've got support, more than you realize." After he left, Alexis opened the envelope. 2 pages from Wolf's perspective. The ambush, the warning shot, the mile shot. The final paragraph made her throat tighten. Petty Officer Hartwell demonstrated extraordinary valor under impossible circumstances. She is exactly the kind of operator we need. Not despite being a woman, but because she brings skills that make us all better. I would serve with her again, without hesitation. 3 days later, Alexis stood before the board. 5 senior officers, Admiral Hawthorne at center. Captain Morrison presented evidence, violations, timeline, facts. Then witnesses. Brennan in a wheelchair, leg healing. Wolf at attention. Bravo team operators speaking about the shots that saved them. The board deliberated 2 hours. Finally, they called her back. Hawthorne held an unopened folder, his face unreadable. Petty Officer First Class Alexis Hartwell. This board has reviewed your actions during Operation Crimson Eagle. We've considered the protocol violations, the insubordination, the refusal to follow direct orders. He opened the folder. We've also considered the results. 12 American lives saved, nuclear material secured, a terrorist cell destroyed, successful rescue of a critically wounded teammate against overwhelming odds. He looked up. The finding of this board: while your methods violated protocols, your judgment was sound. Your actions prevented catastrophic loss of American lives. Therefore, you will receive a formal reprimand for the communications violation. This will be in your permanent record. Alexis felt her stomach drop. A reprimand could end her career. However, Hawthorne continued, you are also awarded the Silver Star for conspicuous gallantry, for exceptional courage under fire and tactical decisions that saved American lives at great personal risk. He stood. The board stood with him. The reprimand will be accompanied by a classified commendation letter stating your actions were taken in the best judgment of a combat operator facing impossible circumstances. Future promotion boards will have access. Hawthorne's expression softened slightly. Rules exist for a reason, but so does judgment. You demonstrated both the courage to act and the wisdom to know when rules serve the mission and when they don't. That's the mark of an exceptional operator. He extended his hand. Alexa shook it. Dismissed. Get back to training. Your team needs you. Outside, Brennan waited on crutches, leg wrapped but healing. How'd it go? Reprimand and the Silver Star. Brennan laughed. Most SEAL thing ever.
They punish you and medal you simultaneously. Master Chief, I need to ask something. His expression turned serious. Sullivan. I've been researching, following the money. He's still out there, still operational. I think he knows I'm looking. What are you planning? Finding him. Getting answers about my mother, my father, all of it. Brennan leaned on his crutches. That's not a mission. That's vendetta. Maybe, but it's mine. And when you find him? Alexis was quiet. I bring him in, the right way, legal, by the book, because that's what separates him from me. Brennan nodded slowly. You'll need help, someone who knows how Sullivan thinks. Are you volunteering? When my leg heals, when doctors clear me, we go after him together. We finish this, but the right way, as a team. Alexis felt purpose settle in her chest. Deal. 6 months later, Alexis stood on the Coronado sniper range. Morning mist made the world gray and soft. Before her, a young woman lay prone behind a rifle. 22 years old, small, wiry, eyes holding desperate determination Alexis remembered from her own early days. The recruit was shaking, breathing too fast, gripping the rifle too tight. I can't find the wind, the recruit said. It's too variable. I'm going to miss. Alexis knelt beside her, careful of her healed left arm. The cast was off, full strength returning. Wind isn't your enemy. It's information. Listen to it. Feel it. Trust your training. The recruit looked at her. What if I fail? Alexis thought about a frozen ridge, an impossible shot, choices made between heartbeats. Then you adjust. Send it again. We don't fail unless we quit, and we don't quit. The recruit breathed, settled, found the respiratory pause. She fired. Downrange, steel rang clear. Perfect hit at 800 meters. The recruit's face lit up. I did it. No, Brennan's voice came from behind. He approached, walking without crutches now, just a slight limp. You proved you can shoot. Now do it when people shoot back. That's when it matters. He looked at Alexis. Ready? She knew what he asked, not about training, about the mission they'd planned for months. Intelligence gathered. Marcus Sullivan's location in a compound outside Karachi. The unauthorized operation to bring a ghost to justice. Ready. They walked from the range together. The sun burned off mist, turned ocean gold. Alexis thought about her mother, her father,
questions still needing answers, justice delayed but not denied. Marcus Sullivan had run 10 years hiding, 10 years thinking he'd escaped. But Alexis Hartwell wasn't her mother. She didn't follow bad orders, didn't accept easy answers, didn't quit. The hunt was on. "You know this is outside authority," Brennan said at the parking lot. "No official mission, no backup, just us and favors we can call." Alexis opened the truck door.
"Good thing I'm used to operating outside authority," Brennan smiled. "Reaper, you'll be the death of me. Not if I help it. Didn't drag you off a mountain to lose you in Karachi." But before they could climb in, Alexis paused, looked back at the range where the young recruit was still shooting. "She reminds me of someone," Brennan said quietly. "Yeah, someone who was told she didn't belong, that she wasn't strong enough, wasn't good enough." "And what happened to that someone?" Alexis touched the photograph in her vest. Her mother's face, worn from being carried through fire. She thought about the mile shot, the impossible pistol shot that downed a missile, the choice to save Brennan instead of chasing glory. She learned the hardest shots aren't the ones you take. They're the ones you choose not to. Brennan nodded slowly. "Your mother knew that too, in the end." "Maybe that's why Sullivan's still running. He took every shot, never learned when to hold fire." "And when we find him?" Alexis climbed into the truck. Through the windshield, she could see the recruit firing again, learning, growing, becoming. "We bring him in alive. Let him face justice. Let him answer for every life he destroyed. That's how we honor my mother, not with revenge, with something better." Brennan got in beside her. "And if he doesn't want to come quietly?" Alexis started the engine. "Then he'll learn what my mother's daughter can do when she's not following someone else's bad orders." They drove off base into the California morning. Two warriors heading toward an uncertain future, bound by fire and blood and the code that said you never abandon a teammate. Somewhere across the world, Marcus Sullivan was about to discover the past he'd buried was coming for him. Not with overwhelming force, not with official sanction, but with two operators who refused to quit, who knew the difference between justice and revenge, who understood that the hardest victories weren't won with bullets, but with principles that bullets couldn't touch. The scope was clear, the range was known, the wind was steady, and Alexis Hartwell had already made two impossible shots. The third one could wait. She had all the time in the world.